Thank you for joining the Spring 2021 Michigan Provided SAT with Essay, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9 for grades 8 and 9. Our goal today is to share the latest information about the state-provided Spring SAT and PSAT related assessments based on current planning. College Board and MDE will continue to finalize implementation details, and as more information becomes available, we will share through the MDE websites and on the Spotlight on Student Assessment and Accountability online newsletter. Today we'll provide general information on the Spring 2021 SAT with Essay, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9 for grades 8 and 9 administrations, an update on changes planned for Spring of 2021 testing, reminders on how the Fall 2020 and Spring 2021 administrations are different, information to help you verify that your school is set up to administer the spring assessments, introductory accommodations and supports information, and tasks that should be done between now and the end of 2020 to get your school ready for testing. As always, the health and safety of students and educators is our first priority. At this time, the fall flexibility options that were provided are only applicable to that testing window. Any potential spring flexibility options are still being determined and will be shared when information is available. The processes for fall 2020 and spring 2021 testing are different. For a full list of differences between fall and spring testing, review the document posted on the MDE websites. Note that the OEAA Secure site was not used for fall of 2020, but will be required for this spring, as well as the Educational Entity Master, or EEM. The College Board test ordering site was required to be used for fall, but will not be used at all for spring. And SSD Online will be required for accommodation requests for the SAT with Essay, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9 for the spring. As always, refer to the Spotlight on Student Assessment and Accountability online newsletter for the implementation information for the College Board assessments. In addition to communication through the Spotlight, College Board and MDE will provide the following supports throughout the year. We will host various webinars, and MDE has several resources available on their websites throughout the year for all assessments provided by the state. Now let's talk about the PSAT 8-9 for 8th grade. In regards to pre-ID, both assessments will be pre-ID'd in the OEAA Secure site. College Board assessments are timed and do not allow for self-pacing. Students must use the entire time allotted for each test. If a student is approved for extended time, they must use the entire time for which they are approved. The PSAT 8-9 is only offered in paper pencil for this spring. Although you had the option to administer digitally for fall testing, that is not available for spring of 2021. And unless absent, students are expected to test on the primary test day for PSAT 8-9 for grade 8. Advanced accommodation requests for the universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations required by students that would have traditionally been used on the M-STEP is required. Schools must request these accommodations through the College Board online system known as SSD Online. Next, we'll talk about some general information for spring of 2021. In regards to what's new, the SSD Online platform is being redesigned to be more efficient and streamlined. Some accommodations may be referred in new ways, but how they are administered won't change. For example, 50% extended time will now be referred to as time and 1/2. 100% extended time will be referred to as double time, and Braille graphs and figures will be referred to as raised line drawings. Additionally, SSD coordinators can download a copy of test directions directly from SSD Online for students approved for a written copy of oral instructions. Also, students can now opt into Student Search Service and complete the optional questionnaire online, providing more flexibility to schools. And specifically for the PSAT related assessments, the primary and makeup test books for PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10 will be different, now aligning to SAT processes. Schools must use a makeup survey to request new test books for the makeup testing windows instead of holding onto them and using the same books for all test dates. The SAT with essay will be one part of the Michigan Merit Exam, which is required for 11th graders and eligible 12th graders. Students testing in a standard room will be required to test on a single day, which will be April 13th. The makeup test date is April 27th. Schools will use a survey to request makeup test books. We will discuss accommodated testing in the upcoming slide. For student eligibility questions, MDE has updated the Who Can Must Take the MME document available on their website. Grade 8 students are expected to take the PSAT 8-9 on the primary test day, which is April 13th. Students absent on the primary test day can be flexibly scheduled to test in the primary testing window, which this year is April 13th through 16th. The makeup window is for any student who was absent during the primary testing window or for students that need to retest due to an irregularity. And the makeup testing window this year is April 27th and 28th. Schools will use a survey to request makeup test books for the PSAT 8-9 this year. Different test books will be used in the primary testing window than in the makeup testing window. And unless absent, students taking the PSAT 10 or PSAT 8-9 for grade 9 are expected to test on a primary test day that is chosen within a primary testing window of April 13th through 16th. Schools can choose which date within that window works best for them as the primary test day. Schools can elect to administer the test to 9th graders on one day, 10th graders on another day, or test both grades on the same day. The remaining days in the primary testing window can then be used for students absent on that primary test day. The makeup window is for any student who was absent during the primary testing window or for students that need to retest due to an irregularity. And this makeup testing window is April 27th and 28th. Schools will use a survey to request makeup test books for the PSAT 10 and PSAT 8-9 this year. The accommodated testing window is April 13th through 26th. All students with approved accommodations taking the PSAT 8-9 for grade 8, PSAT 8-9 for grade 9, and the PSAT 10 can flexibly be scheduled anytime during this accommodated testing window. Only students with approved accommodations taking the SAT with essay as designated on the Non-Standard Administration Report or NAR in SSD Online can flexibly be scheduled anytime in the accommodated window. Here's a summary of the 2021 testing dates. Now we'll move on to talk about the roles and responsibilities of testing staff. The test coordinator is responsible for all aspects of the administration at a school, including preparation activities such as planning rooms and identifying staff to serve as proctors, room monitors, and hall monitors for test day. They also receive, inventory, and secure test materials. The activities on test day they are responsible for include distribution of materials, monitoring of all test day activities and staff, packaging and returning test materials, and completing necessary forms. The test coordinator may choose to enlist the aid of others at the school to help with test day planning and setup. However, the test day coordinator will remain the main contact and receive communications from the College Board. The test coordinator should coordinate with the SSD coordinator to ensure that students with disabilities and English learners are appropriately planned for. The SSD coordinator is responsible for being the school's liaison with the College Board Services for Students with Disabilities office. They will submit accommodation requests and plan for English learner supports for all students who request them. They will also print the roster of students approved for accommodations, which is the NAR. Schools may have more than one SSD coordinator. However, one person will be identified as a primary SSD coordinator who will receive communications from College Board. If a school has multiple SSD coordinators, the primary SSD coordinator should share any communications with the other SSD coordinators. The SSD coordinator and test coordinator should also collaborate with the district EL coordinator to help plan for testing students with EL supports. The proctor is responsible for managing all activities that happen in the testing room. They conduct the test and monitor test takers to ensure a fair administration. Each room requires one proctor. The room monitors and hall monitors are responsible for assisting the test coordinator and proctor. Room monitors help set up the testing area and monitor testing, while hall monitors patrol the hallways during testing to make sure the testing area remains quiet and secure. Staff with children cannot have access to any test materials for the same assessments the child is taking before test day. If a staff member's child will be taking the SAT, for example, he or she cannot have access to testing materials before test day for the SAT, no matter if the child lives with the staff member or not. He or she may have access to testing materials prior to test day for the PSAT 10 or PSAT 8-9. Staff with students who reside in the same household cannot have access to any test materials for the same assessments the child is taking before test day. If a staff member's niece will be taking the SAT and the niece does not live in the same house with the staff member, he or she could have access to testing materials before test day for the SAT. Proctors may not administer the test to any member of his or her family. It is possible for test day staff to serve multiple roles in a small school. Additional flexibility may be available if needed. Call the Michigan Educator Hotline for guidance. The rest of the presentation will focus on activities before testing and some during testing. We will have an additional webinar in January that covers activities primarily related to after testing. Let's focus first on establishing your school to test. Educational Entity Master, or EEM, is the repository of entity and contact information for educational systems in Michigan. College Board uses the data in EEM to identify contact information for testing staff and the address to send testing materials. Review and update the testing staff in the EEM at a building level as soon as possible. If there is more than one person listed for a role, College Board will use the most recent. If the information listed is correct, no action is needed. But if information is incorrect, EEM should be updated by the district authorized user. Anytime the identified staff changes during the school year, EEM should be updated to reflect the changes. College Board receives the updates about 7 to 10 days after making the change. Be sure to identify or update in EEM at the building level the following roles as necessary. If EEM information is not accurate, you will not receive critical communications throughout the year. To view school and contact information that will be provided to College Board, you can go to the website on your screen. Search for your school in the EEM search window and click the link for your school. To send a message to the district authorized user, you can click on your school name and then click Contact Authorized User. Or you can use the district and school contact page under the Assessment Registration tab of the secure site to retrieve the name and contact information for your district authorized user. Once you click on your school's name, scroll to the bottom of the page, then click Details next to the name to confirm the email and address associated with that coordinator record is accurate. This email that you have listed is where your emails will be sent, and the address listed associated with the test coordinator record is where test materials will be sent. Any non-public schools should contact nonpublicschools@michigan.gov to update EEM. The establishment process is essentially how College Board knows which schools are administering the PSAT-related assessments or the SAT with essay. All schools do need an attending institution or AI code to administer College Board assessments. This will also be referred to as your school code, but note it's different than your Michigan assigned building code. The AI code is 6 digits and usually starts with a 2-3. The purpose of this code is to connect your student data to your school and the College Board systems. To confirm your AI code, it can be looked up online. And as establishment activities are completed, AI codes will be included in the test center participation page of the secure site. Coordinators will also receive email confirmation of the AI code in the December-January timeframe. And as we think about establishment, there are 2 general routes for establishment, one for public schools and one for non-public schools. Let's talk about public schools first. MDE and College Board have determined rules in which some schools are automatically established to participate for an assessment. If a school has been automatically established and plans to administer the assessment, then no action is needed. You're all set to go. If a school does not meet the auto establishment rules for a particular assessment, the school will need to indicate their intent to participate for that assessment. If a school has been automatically established but does not plan to administer the assessment, contact College Board immediately to request to be unestablished. Make sure you're ready to provide a reason for why you're requesting unestablishment. And here are the rules for automatically establishing a public school. Public schools will be automatically established to administer the PSAT 8-9 for grade 8 if the actual grade listed in EEM includes 8 and your school tested at least 5 students combined in the last 2 testing years. And so that would be MSTEP in 2018 and PSAT 8-9 for grade 8 in 2019, since there was no testing in spring of 2020. You will also be automatically established if the actual grade listed in EEM includes 8 and your school is new this year. Public schools will be automatically established to administer PSAT 8-9 for grade 9 if the actual grade listed in EEM includes 9 and your school tested at least 5 students combined in the last 2 testing years, or if your actual grade listed in EEM includes 9 and your school is new. Public schools will be automatically established to administer PSAT 10 if the actual grade includes 10 and your school tested at least 5 students combined in the last 2 testing years, or if your actual grade includes 10 and your school is new. And finally, public schools will be automatically established to administer the SAT with essay if the actual grade includes 11 and your school tested at least 5 students combined in the last 2 testing years, or if your actual grade is 11 and your school is new this year. As for the non-public school process, non-public schools must indicate their intent to participate every year for each assessment. If you choose to administer the SAT, you must administer all parts of the MME. If you choose to administer the PSAT 8-9 for grade 8, you must also administer the MSTEP. Roles should be identified or reviewed in EEM as soon as possible. Using the contact information provided by MDE, College Board sent an email to all non-public schools requesting confirmation of their intent to participate the week of November 2nd. To confirm, follow the instructions in your email. Provide your state-assigned district and building codes, the name of your school, and the assessments you plan to administer. You must respond by November 20th, or your school may not be able to administer the assessments. District assessment coordinators, principals, and test coordinators received an intent to participate email the week of November 2nd only if your school was not automatically established. This includes all non-public schools and only certain public schools that did not meet the auto establishment rules that we previously discussed. If you received an intent to participate communication, then please follow the instructions in that email by November 20th so that you can administer the assessments. Follow the directions in the email even if you don't plan to participate so that we can remove you from the communications list this year. MDE has a test center participation page in the secure site where schools can verify the assessments they are established for. This establishment process began the week of October 26th and will continue on a rolling basis. As the establishment participation statuses change, they will be updated in the secure site as these activities occur. But please allow for potential changes. Contact the Michigan Educator Hotline only if your establishment information is not correct in the secure site by December 18th. Some common issues that delay a school's establishment is if the actual grades listed in EEM are inaccurate, if the coordinator information is inaccurate in EEM, if the address associated with the coordinator record in EEM is inaccurate, schools don't respond to the intent to participate communication by the deadline, or if updates to EEM are made at the district level instead of the building level. Next, we'll move on to pre-ID of students. A reminder, do not place orders directly in the College Board test ordering site for the spring 2021 Michigan provided assessments. You did that for fall, but you will not do that for spring. College Board will determine your initial material order for the Michigan provided assessments based on the number of students pre-ID'd to test in the secure site and the number of students approved for accommodations in the College Board's online system. If students are not pre-ID'd by February 17th, you may not receive enough test materials and labels for test day. MDE will open the pre-ID window in the secure site on January 6th. Public school students will automatically be pre-ID'd based on fall count day enrollment if the school was established by January 6th. Non-public schools and public schools established after January 6th must pre-ID all students they are testing. So when this pre-ID window opens in January, log into the secure site, update the pre-ID student report by unassigning students who will not test and assigning any new students. All updates must be completed by February 17th in order to receive pre-printed labels. Labels and answer sheets will be shipped to schools for all students who are pre-ID'd by February 17th. Schools will receive a printed pre-ID label for each pre-ID'd student to be affixed to the answer sheet. For any students pre-ID'd after the deadline, schools must generate a label locally for the student from the secure site. College Board will ship a small overage of test materials to account for newly enrolled test takers, typically students who are last-minute transfers into the school, etc. All answer sheets must have a pre-ID label in order to be processed. Missing or incorrect labels will delay scoring or make scoring not possible. Now we'll talk about training and determining staff needs. MDE requires training each year for test coordinators. This includes an assessment security training provided by OEAA, review the overview of test security chapter of the MDE Assessment Coordinator Training Guide for guidelines on how to access the training. They also require the online training provided by College Board. Completion of training for fall of 2020 testing does not count for spring of 2021. There will be one Michigan training module that covers all assessments. Coordinators will receive an email with a link to access the online training in early March. And it takes approximately 45 to 60 minutes to complete, and it's broken up into modules. Test coordinators are required to train other test day staff in some way. Test coordinators could use staff meetings, for example, to train all staff, or provide the following options. To train proctors, you could forward the College Board training email that you get. There's a module specifically for proctors and how to administer the test, and takes approximately 20 to 30 minutes to complete. There's an optional PowerPoint that will be available on the MDE website to provide to room and hall monitors if you wanted to train your monitors that way. And for training your SSD coordinators, one option is to take the test coordinator training or the proctor training, depending on his or her test day role. Again, review the overview for test security chapter of the MDE Assessment Coordinator Training Guide for guidelines on assessment security training for other test day staff. College Board will also provide a Michigan-specific manual for the SAT with Essay, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9. Schools can use the same PSAT 8-9 manual for 8th and 9th grades. The SAT manuals provide specialized information to each type of test day staff. The coordinator manual includes information about the test day setup, pre-administration session, forms, and return of standard and accommodated materials. The standard testing manual includes all test day scripts and information needed by proctors using standard timing. The accommodated testing manual includes test day scripts for proctors in the accommodated rooms. The PSAT 10 and PSAT 8-9 coordinator manuals includes information both for the coordinator and the scripts for the proctors. And please do not use any fall 2020 manuals during spring of 2021 testing. The staffing that you need for test day depends on the size of the cohort you're testing, the number of testing rooms, and the number of students in each room. Besides the policies regarding familial relationships that we already talked about, per MDE guidelines, test day staff should be licensed teachers or licensed education and administrators employed by the district. If not available, then test day staff may be paraprofessionals or non-licensed administrative personnel employed by the district, or licensed substitute teachers employed by the district for the purpose of administering the test. Per College Board guidelines, test day staff cannot be employed by an outside test prep company or have taken the SAT within 180 days of the administration date. The coordinator manuals have additional guidelines for test day staff. Once you determine the rooms you're using for testing and the number of students in each room, you can determine how many staff you need. Every testing room needs one proctor. For standard rooms with more than 34 students, assign additional room monitors to help. For accommodated rooms with more than 20 students, assign additional room monitors to help. Now moving on to accommodations and supports. As I mentioned previously, some accommodation names will be updated. Only the name will change, but how the accommodation is requested or administered will not change. Additionally, how the name is referenced in the manuals may be slightly abbreviated for conciseness and ease of reading. Some examples are included, but this is not an exhaustive list. All accommodations for the Michigan provided assessments in spring must have prior approval and be requested through the College Board SSD Online system. Students taking the PSAT 8-9 for fall did not need to have SSD approval, but this is required for spring testing. Most requests are automatically approved within a few days and require no submission of documentation. There are some requests that will require that documentation be submitted and could take up to 7 weeks for review. Schools should designate an SSD coordinator that has access to SSD Online and submits the requests on behalf of students. Schools can have multiple SSD coordinators to submit those requests. The vast majority of students who are approved for and are using testing accommodations at their school through their current IEP or 504 will have those same accommodations automatically approved for taking the SAT with SA, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9. These requests will be processed through school verification, allowing the SSD coordinator to provide the answers to the following questions when submitting requests. Is the requested accommodation in the student's plan? And is the student consistently using this accommodation for school tests? There are two general categories of accommodations. The first are College Board approved accommodations. These require pre-approval and result in college and scholarship reportable scores. They are primarily used for students with diagnosed disabilities documented in a 504 or an IEP plan. You can request College Board approved accommodations anytime from now until February 22nd. The other category are state allowed accommodations. They also require pre-approval, but are automatically approved and require no documentation. The big point for state allowed accommodations is they do not result in college and scholarship reportable scores. They must be applied for every year and are recommended for 8th grade students. The window to apply for SAAs or state allowed accommodations starts the week of January 11th and ends February 22nd. More information about the differences between College Board approved and state allowed accommodations will be discussed in the Accommodations and Supports webinar on December 9th. If you have new SSD coordinators that need access to the system, they will need a College Board professional account first. Once they have created their College Board professional account, they will complete the SSD coordinator form found at collegeboard.org/SSD. Once they submit that form, they will receive an access code to link SSD Online to their College Board professional account, and that access code is needed only one time. It may take 1 to 2 days to get that access code. You can have multiple SSD coordinators, but only one can be identified as the primary SSD coordinator in the EEM. In order to gain access, schools have to have an AI code first. Accommodation requests can begin once you receive your access code. Test coordinators that also would like to have access to SSD Online can complete the same steps to get access to the system, but consider your district policy regarding student privacy when accessing information for students with disabilities before requesting access. Also note that the primary SSD coordinator identified in EEM is used for communication purposes only. SSD coordinators must also request access to SSD Online to be able to submit requests. If you have students already in the system with prior approvals, if those students had College Board approved accommodations in spring of 2020, if the student is in the same school this year, then confirm the accommodation is appropriate based on their current IEP or 504 and that their graduation date is accurate in SSD Online. If those things are true, then reapplication is not necessary. If a student has changed to a different school this year, then the student must be transferred to the new school in SSD Online. That will not be done automatically for you. Then confirm that the accommodation is appropriate based on their current IEP or 504 and that their graduation date is accurate. For students who had state allowed accommodations last spring, determine if state allowed accommodations or College Board approved accommodations are appropriate for this year. Reapply for the state allowed accommodations or apply for the College Board approved accommodations as needed. Students with prior approvals in SSD Online that no longer qualify due to a change in their IEP or 504 must have those accommodations removed from the system. And again, more information about how to transfer these students to your school will be included in that accommodations and supports webinar on December 9th. In regards to English learner supports, EL students can use translated test directions and/or approved word-for-word bilingual dictionaries without prior approval. Translated test directions for designated languages are in PDF format and must be printed by the school ahead of test day. The translated test directions can be provided orally by an approved translator to the student in languages not available in PDF format. The approved dictionary list is currently available on the MDE websites. English learners can also be provided with time and 1/2 for the Michigan provided assessments. And although not an accommodation, students must be identified in SSD Online in order to receive correct testing materials. Students will be automatically approved and no documentation will be required. If this support was entered for a student for fall testing, reapplication for spring testing is not needed. If a student needs a new request for time and 1/2, these can be added starting in January. Criteria for determining who may benefit from EL supports can be found in the Supports and Accommodations Guidance document posted on the Michigan websites. And also note that EL supports are not currently available for the PSAT NMSQT, weekend SAT testing, or AP testing. And as we already talked about, SSD Online is being redesigned for a more efficient and streamlined system. The redesigned system is set to launch by December 2020. Information about the redesigned system and a more detailed look into accommodations and English learner supports will be available in the Accommodations and Supports webinar on December 9th. Now we'll talk about your shipments. Test coordinators will receive distinct shipments for each grade in preparation for spring testing. Note that each shipment may come in multiple boxes and that standard materials will come separately from accommodated materials, and they will all be addressed to the test coordinator. The first shipment you will receive is your coordinator planning kit in early March. This includes a sample set of manuals and some posters for your school. The pre-administration materials and primary test materials will come at the same time in late March, and your makeup test materials will come in late April. Preparing your schedule. Coordinators should work with the principal and other staff to think about planning for the following: the number of staff that you need, the rooms that you're going to use, the schedule for test day, scheduling a pre-administration session prior to test day, and preparing materials for the pre-administration session and for test day. The College Board Student Search Service is a free voluntary program that connects students with information about educational and financial aid opportunities from nearly 1,900 eligible colleges and universities and scholarship and other educational programs. By opting into Student Search Service and completing the optional questionnaire, students are allowing the College Board to share personal information such as college preferences and plans for the future with colleges and scholarship organizations. This will provide students with information about colleges and universities that match the student's academic interests, information on financial aid and scholarships, helping deserving students to access the assistance they are eligible to receive, and information about academic majors, courses, and degree options. The College Board only shares student data with eligible colleges, universities, and scholarship and educational opportunity programs that have signed an agreement to communicate with students only for the purposes listed on the prior slide. These entities most often connect with students based on expected graduation date, GPA, score range, and intended college major as indicated on the optional questionnaire. Opting into Student Search Service is not available for PSAT 8-9. Students who are under the age of 18 and are participating in the Michigan-provided SAT with Essay or PSAT 10 will need parental consent to opt into the Student Search Service and to complete the optional questionnaire. Schools should gather parental consent in accordance with their district policy. There is a form available on the MDE website for schools to use if they choose. Consent forms should remain at the school for 3 years and do not need to be returned to College Board. Consent only needs to be obtained once. When you schedule your pre-administration session, the tasks of this session include bubbling in all of the required information for scoring, allowing students to opt into Student Search Service and complete the optional questionnaire, and for students taking the SAT to identify where the student wants their 4 free score reports to be sent. While scheduling a pre-administration session for SAT with Essay, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9 prior to test day is always optional, it is highly recommended. All parts of the pre-administration session can be done on test day if needed. If you choose to hold a pre-administration session prior to conducting the session, pass out a copy of the applicable student guide to each student. Student guides provide information about the test and explains how student data is used. If you choose not to hold a pre-administration session, ensure students have a copy prior to test day. Students may now opt into Student Search Service and complete the online questionnaire outside of school day testing. Schools must notify parents if students are encouraged by the school to complete this process online. A College Board flyer is available for distribution to parents on the MDE web pages under the parent-student information. Districts and schools can also find additional guidance on parental consent on the MDE web pages. Students who complete the optional questionnaire and opt into Student Search Service online must still bubble in all required information for scoring prior to starting the test. For additional information on Student Search Service, see the Student Search Service guidance document on the MDE web pages. Directions that can be provided to students include going to the website listed on your screen and logging in using their College Board student account information. They can create a College Board student account if necessary. They would then click Select Now and follow the prompts. Students can complete the online option and update their information at any time. More detailed information about this process and how to help your students will be available in Spotlight. To prepare for your pre-administration session, affix the pre-ID labels to the front of the student answer sheets. Identify which students have parental consent to complete the optional questionnaire and opt into Student Search Service. Students will use copies of the student answer sheet instructions during the session. The estimated time is about 45 to 60 minutes if students are completing the questionnaire for SAT and about 25 to 35 minutes if students are completing the questionnaire for PSAT 10. Students can send their SAT scores to colleges, universities, and scholarship programs by bubbling the codes on their answer sheet. The student answer sheet instructions have those list of codes. Students do not need parental consent to submit their score sends. All students taking the SAT should be encouraged to complete this portion on their answer sheet. If students complete the online questionnaire, they will still need to identify their score sends on their answer sheet. Students can submit additional score sends from their College Board account for a fee, and low-income students have unlimited free score sends from their College Board account. Students will not complete any of the optional questions for PSAT 8-9. They will only bubble in the required elements on their answer sheet, and no consent is necessary since students are not completing any optional questionnaire. Therefore, the student answer sheet instructions are not necessary and will not be sent for PSAT 8-9. Schools can determine if the required bubbling needs to occur prior to test day during a pre-administration session or just can be completed on test day. For SAT with essay, the standard schedule includes testing room doors closing at 8 a.m. for test day administrative activities and testing beginning around 8:30. Schools may alter the start time by 30 minutes and therefore close testing room doors as early as 7:30 or as late as 8:30, and they may start testing anytime between 8 and 9. Schools must contact the Michigan Educator Hotline for consideration and approval to start earlier or later than these times. Testing is allowed in the afternoon for PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10 only. Begin testing early enough to complete testing by the end of the day. Schools should plan for approximately 5 hours of testing, including test day administrative activities, testing, and break times. The schedule below does not include passing out test booklets or other test day administrative activities, such as completing the optional questionnaire or identifying score sends. Schools must complete testing before breaking for lunch, and testing must be done in the morning for the SAT. Plan for approximately 3 hours for PSAT 8-9 and about 3.5 hours for PSAT 10 to account for test day administrative activities, testing, and break times. The schedule below does not include passing out and collecting test books or other test day administrative activities. College Board will support morning or afternoon testing for PSAT-related assessments only. Morning testing should begin early enough to complete before lunch, and no permission is necessary for afternoon testing. Also note that 8th and 9th graders cannot test together. And our last topic, preparing your testing rooms. The size of the cohort testing and the size of rooms used for testing will determine the number of rooms that you need. We do allow for larger spaces such as auditoriums or gymnasiums, or you could use your classrooms. Also think about the location of the testing rooms with the building. Separate them from other classes or tests on different schedules, and try to minimize noise from other disruptions or from outside the building as much as possible. Also follow local health department guidelines when determining room configurations for testing. Here are the seating and furniture requirements you should utilize for spring testing. And while most schools participating in the spring 2021 Michigan provided assessments will use their schools at their test location, if you need more space or if your school is a virtual school, you can request off-site testing location. Additional details have already been shared by a Spotlight. A request form will be a Google form that can be edited after submission. You will go to sat.org/offsite request for both your SAT and PSAT related requests. The submitter will receive an email confirmation of the submission, which will include the link to edit the submission if necessary. To request an offsite location, a request and test plan must be submitted by December 18th. Something new this year for offsite testing, submission of the request can be assumed to be automatically approved unless otherwise communicated by College Board. No specific approval email will be sent to coordinators. Also note that requests for offsite testing for College Board assessments must be done separately than offsite testing requests for MSTEP or ACT WorkKeys. And final information for today. Some tasks to complete between now and the end of 2020 to prepare your school for spring testing. First, ensure EEM is updated and accurate as soon as possible at the building level. Respond to the intent to participate communication if you received it by November 20th. If you didn't receive an intent to participate communication, verify in the Test Center participation page in the secure site that your school is established to participate in the appropriate assessments by December 18th. Submit an offsite testing request if needed by December 18th, and request access to SSD online as needed. And thank you for your time today. The resources are available on MDE websites. Contact the Michigan Educator Hotline if you have questions, or the Michigan Field Team. And as always, refer to the Spotlight on Student Assessment and Accountability online newsletter for updates. Thank you.